The morning sun was barely up when Daniel stepped into the airport terminal, his backpack slung over one shoulder and his phone in hand. He looked like any other young traveler heading out for a business trip. Nothing about his appearance screamed wealth or privilege. He wore his favorite gray hoodie, comfortable jeans, and a pair of sneakers that had seen better days. To him, comfort mattered more than showing off designer labels. Daniel had a big day ahead. He was flying from New York to Los Angeles for a meeting that could change everything for his career. At 28, he had worked hard to step out of his father's shadow and make his own mark in the business world. Yes, his father was Richard Wellington, one of the richest men in America, but Daniel wanted people to know him for his own achievements, not just his last name. The security line moved slowly, as it always does at busy airports. Daniel waited patiently, scrolling through his emails and mentally preparing for the pitch he would deliver later that day. He had spent weeks working on this deal, and everything had to be perfect. When he finally reached his gate, he noticed it was already crowded with passengers waiting to board. The announcement came over the speaker, calling for first-class passengers to board first. Daniel grabbed his backpack and joined the line, showing his boarding pass to the gate agent, who smiled and welcomed him aboard. As he walked down the narrow aisle of the plane, Daniel could feel a few eyes on him. It was something he had gotten used to over the years. Being a young black man in spaces where people didn't expect to see you came with its own set of challenges. He had learned to brush it off, to keep his head high and not let the stares and whispers get to him. His seat was 2A, right by the window in the front section of the plane. Perfect for getting some work done during the flight. He moved toward his row, ready to settle in and relax before takeoff. But as he approached, he noticed a woman already seated in 2B right next to his spot. She was probably in her early 50s, well-dressed in business attire with her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked up as Daniel came closer, and her expression immediately changed. Daniel gave her a polite nod and smiled. "Excuse me," he said softly, trying to slide past her to get to the window seat. The woman didn't move. Instead, she looked him up and down with narrowed eyes, her lips pressed into a thin line. "I think you're in the wrong section," she said, her voice loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Daniel paused, confused. "No, I'm in 2A. This is my seat." He held up his boarding pass, showing her the printed confirmation. She barely glanced at it. "First class is for paying customers," she said sharply. "You need to go back to economy, where you belong." The words hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. He had heard comments like this before, but it never got easier. He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Ma'am, I have a first-class ticket. This is my assigned seat." By now, other passengers were starting to pay attention. Some pretended not to notice, burying their faces in their phones or books. Others openly stared, waiting to see what would happen next. A flight attendant noticed the commotion and hurried over. "Is everything okay here?" she asked, her voice professional but concerned. The woman in 2B immediately launched into her complaint. "This young man is trying to take a first-class seat. I don't think he belongs here. Can you please check his ticket?" "I'm sure there's been some mistake." The flight attendant turned to Daniel with an apologetic look. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Daniel handed it over, his jaw tight with frustration. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, a mix of anger and humiliation washing over him. The flight attendant examined the pass carefully and then nodded. "Everything is in order, sir. You're in the correct seat." She turned to the woman. "Ma'am, this gentleman has a valid first-class ticket. He's assigned to seat 2A. The woman's face flushed red. "Well, I want to speak to the captain. I don't feel safe sitting next to him. He looks threatening." Daniel felt his hands clench into fists at his sides. Threatening. He hadn't done anything except try to sit in the seat he paid for. He looked around and saw that several passengers had their phones out now, some clearly recording the interaction. "Ma'am, I assure you there's no issue," the flight attendant said, her voice firm but polite. "If you're uncomfortable, we can see about moving you to another seat." "I'm not moving," the woman snapped. "He should move. He's the one who doesn't belong here." Daniel had reached his limit. "Look, I just want to sit down and get to my meeting. I'm not causing any trouble. I have every right to be here." He tried once more to step past the woman to reach his seat. That's when everything went wrong. As Daniel moved forward, the woman suddenly stood up and swung her hand, slapping him hard across the face. The sound echoed through the cabin like a gunshot. "Don't you dare touch me," she screamed. "He's attacking me. Someone help!" The entire first-class section went silent. Daniel stood frozen, his cheek stinging from the impact. He couldn't believe what had just happened. He hadn't touched her. He hadn't done anything except try to sit down. His first instinct was to react, to defend himself, to yell back. But he knew better. He knew that if he raised his voice or made any sudden movement, he would be the one blamed. So instead he stood there, his hand moving slowly to his face, feeling the heat spreading across his cheek. The flight attendant looked horrified. "Ma'am, you need to calm down right now." Other passengers started speaking up. "She hit him," a man across the aisle called out. "I saw the whole thing. He didn't touch her. I got it on video," a woman behind them said, holding up her phone. "He was just trying to get to his seat." But the woman in 2B wasn't backing down. "He was threatening me." "I felt scared." "You all saw him coming toward me." Another flight attendant rushed over, and soon the head flight attendant arrived as well. They asked Daniel if he was okay. He nodded slowly, not trusting himself to speak. His mind was racing. This was supposed to be a simple flight. He had a huge meeting waiting for him in Los Angeles. And now this. The head flight attendant spoke into her radio, calling for the captain. Within minutes, the captain himself came out from the cockpit to assess the situation. Multiple passengers volunteered their video footage, all showing clearly that Daniel had done nothing wrong. Daniel watched it all unfold like he was outside his own body. He saw the captain's serious expression as he reviewed the videos. He heard the woman still insisting she was the victim. He felt the eyes of every passenger in first class on him, judging, wondering, assuming. "Sir," the captain said, turning to Daniel, "I'm very sorry about this incident. Would you like us to call airport security? You have every right to press charges for assault." Daniel looked at his watch. If they delayed the flight any longer, he might miss his meeting. The meeting he had worked so hard for. The deal that could prove to everyone, including himself, that he was more than just his father's son. "I just want to get to Los Angeles," he said quietly. "I have an important meeting I can't miss." The captain nodded with respect in his eyes. Then he turned to the woman. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with me. You're being removed from this flight." The woman's face went from red to white in an instant. "What? No. You can't remove me. I'm the victim here." Her voice had gone up an octave, drawing even more attention from passengers still boarding the plane. The captain remained calm, but firm. "Ma'am, multiple witnesses and video evidence show that you physically assaulted another passenger without provocation. We cannot allow you to remain on this aircraft. This is ridiculous," she shrieked, grabbing her designer purse from under the seat. "Do you know who I am? I will sue this airline. I will sue all of you." Two security officers appeared at the entrance of the plane. They had been called the moment the captain radioed the cockpit. As they made their way down the aisle, the woman continued her protests, getting louder with each step they took. Daniel stood there, still processing everything. Part of him felt vindicated that the truth was clear for everyone to see, but another part of him just felt exhausted. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened, and he knew it probably wouldn't be the last. "Sir," the head flight attendant said softly to Daniel, "we're going to need a few minutes to clear the aircraft and reset. Would you like to wait in the jetway? We can bring you some water." Daniel shook his head. "I'll just sit down if that's okay. I really need to review some documents for my meeting." She nodded with understanding in her eyes. "Of course. Again, we're terribly sorry about this incident. If you need anything at all during the flight, please let us know." As the security officers escorted the woman off the plane, she turned back one more time, pointing at Daniel. "You'll regret this. All of you will regret this. I know people. Important people." The doors finally closed behind her, and a collective sigh seemed to go through the cabin. Several passengers came up to Daniel as he settled into his window seat. An elderly man from across the aisle leaned over. "Son, I'm sorry you had to go through that. That was completely uncalled for. I made sure to send my video to the airline's customer service email already." A younger woman with kind eyes stopped by his seat. "I posted the video on social media. I hope that's okay. People need to see this kind of thing still happens. I tagged the airline too." Daniel managed a weak smile. "Thank you, both of you. I appreciate you speaking up." More passengers offered their support as they passed by. Some just gave him an encouraging nod or a sympathetic look. But Daniel also noticed a few passengers who avoided eye contact, who seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. He wondered what they were thinking. Once everyone was seated and the plane finally started taxiing toward the runway, Daniel pulled out his laptop. He tried to focus on his presentation, on the numbers and projections he had spent weeks perfecting. But his mind kept drifting back to what had just happened. His cheek still felt warm where she had hit him. He thought about his father who had built an empire from nothing. His father had faced discrimination countless times on his way up. He had been denied loans, laughed out of meetings, and told he didn't belong in boardrooms. But he never let it stop him. He kept pushing, kept proving people wrong, until he became impossible to ignore. Daniel had grown up watching his father handle these situations with grace and dignity. Never give them the reaction they want, his father always said. Let your success be your response. The flight attendant came by with a bottle of water and a small first aid kit. Just in case, she said quietly. And, sir, the captain wanted me to tell you that this incident will be fully documented and reported. The passenger who assaulted you has been banned from the airline. Thank you, Daniel said, accepting the water. Can I ask you something? Of course. Does this happen a lot? People assuming passengers don't belong in first class based on how they look? The flight attendant hesitated, then nodded slowly. More often than it should. We receive complaints regularly, and unfortunately they're not always about actual issues. Sometimes it's just about assumptions people make. She paused. For what it's worth, you handled that with more grace than most people would have, including me. After she walked away, Daniel finally opened his laptop and tried to work. The flight was smooth and he managed to get through most of his presentation review. But every now and then he would catch someone looking at him, and he wondered if they recognized him from the incident or if they were just curious. About halfway through the flight, his phone buzzed with messages. He had turned it to airplane mode, but somehow notifications were still coming through from the plane's Wi-Fi. He opened his social media apps and his stomach dropped. The videos were everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Hashtags were already trending. He scrolled through hundreds of posts, thousands of comments. Some people were outraged on his behalf. Others were debating what had really happened, despite the clear video evidence. And some were digging into who he was. Oh no, he whispered under his breath. Within just 2 hours, people had figured out his identity. His full name was being shared across platforms. Photos of him from charity events, business conferences, and family gatherings were being reposted, and then came the connection everyone was making. That's Richard Wellington's son. The tech billionaire's kid just got slapped on a plane for being black. He's worth millions and someone thought he couldn't afford first class. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Comments poured in from celebrities, business leaders, and regular people alike. The story was spreading faster than Daniel could have imagined. News outlets were picking it up. Entertainment websites were running headlines. Even international media was starting to report on it. His phone rang. It was his father. Dad, I'm on a plane. I'll call you when I land. I know what happened. His father's deep voice came through. I've already seen the videos. Are you all right? I'm fine, really. I just want to get to this meeting and focus on work. His father was quiet for a moment. I'm proud of you, son, for keeping your composure, for not retaliating. That took strength. It didn't feel like strength. It felt like I had no choice. That's exactly what makes it strength. Listen, I know you want to handle this yourself, but I'm releasing a statement. Not as your father trying to protect you, but as a black man who's been in your shoes too many times to count. Daniel closed his eyes. Okay, thank you, Dad. And Daniel, whatever happens with this meeting today, remember why you're there. Don't let this morning define your entire day. After they hung up, Daniel saw his father's statement already posted online. It was short but powerful, talking about dignity, respect, and the reality that success doesn't shield anyone from prejudice. Within minutes, it had been shared tens of thousands of times. The rest of the flight passed in a blur. Daniel tried to ignore his phone, tried to get back into work mode, but it was impossible. The woman sitting next to him, who had taken the now empty 2B seat, kept glancing at him with recognition in her eyes. Finally, she spoke up. You're handling all of this really well. I've been reading the posts. People are really rallying behind you. Thanks, Daniel said, not sure what else to say. Can I ask what the meeting is about? In LA? Daniel hesitated. He didn't usually share business details with strangers. But something about the day made him feel like nothing mattered anymore. It's an acquisition deal. My firm is looking at investing in a company that needs help staying afloat. That sounds important. I hope it goes well. Me too. When the plane finally touched down in Los Angeles, Daniel felt relief wash over him. But as they taxied to the gate, he looked out the window and saw something that made his heart sink. There were news vans, camera crews, reporters with microphones standing on the tarmac. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice came over the intercom. "We ask that you please remain seated for a moment after we reach the gate. We have some media presence outside and want to ensure all passengers can deplane safely and without harassment." The passenger next to Daniel gave him a sympathetic look. "I think they're here for you." Daniel nodded slowly. Of course they were. The story had blown up so fast that reporters had managed to figure out which flight he was on and where he was landing. His quiet business trip had turned into a media circus. As the plane finally stopped and the seatbelt sign turned off, the flight attendant came to Daniel's row. "Sir, we have a plan to help you avoid the reporters if you'd like. We can have you wait until everyone else deplanes, then escort you through a private exit." Daniel thought about it for a moment. Part of him wanted to hide, to avoid the cameras and questions and chaos. But another part of him thought about all the people who had spoken up on the plane, who had shared the videos, who were now supporting him online. "No," he said, standing up and grabbing his backpack. "I'll walk out the regular way. I have nothing to hide and I have a meeting to get to." The flight attendant smiled with admiration. "Good luck, sir." Daniel walked down the aisle, thanked the crew, and stepped into the jetway. He could already hear the shouting from the terminal. Questions being yelled, camera shutters clicking, people calling his name. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and walked forward into whatever came next. The moment Daniel stepped into the terminal, the chaos hit him like a wave. Reporters rushed forward. Microphones stretched toward his face, cameras flashing from every direction. The noise was overwhelming. "Daniel, how do you feel about what happened on the flight? Are you going to press charges? What do you want to say to the woman who hit you? Is your father planning to take legal action against the airline?" Daniel kept walking, his eyes fixed straight ahead. Airport security formed a protective barrier around him, trying to push the crowd back. He had been in the public eye before because of his father's fame, but never like this. This felt different, more intense, more personal. A young reporter managed to get close enough to block his path. "Daniel, millions of people have seen the video. Do you think this incident represents a larger problem in America?" Daniel stopped. He could have kept walking, could have stayed silent like his PR team would probably advise. But something made him pause. He looked at the reporter, then at all the cameras pointed at him. "I think," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully, "that what happened to me this morning happens to a lot of people every single day. The only difference is that this time people were recording. This time people spoke up." He paused. "I'm fortunate. I have resources, I have a platform. I have people who will believe me. But there are countless others who go through similar experiences and nobody ever knows about it. Nobody ever stands up for them." The reporters erupted with more questions, but Daniel held up his hand. "That's all I'm going to say right now. I have an important meeting to get to. Thank you." He continued walking, and security helped him navigate through the crowd. By the time he reached the exit and climbed into the waiting car, he was exhausted, and the day had barely started. In the car, Daniel checked his phone again. The statement he had just made was already being transcribed and shared online. His words were being analyzed, debated, praised, and criticized. It was dizzying how fast everything moved in the digital age. But what really caught his attention were the developments around the woman who had hit him. The internet had done what the internet does best. They had found out everything about her. Her name was Patricia Reynolds. She was a real estate agent in Connecticut. Her company's website had crashed from the flood of angry visitors. Her personal social media accounts, which she had apparently forgotten to make private, were being screenshotted and shared everywhere. And what people found there wasn't pretty. Old posts complaining about certain people moving into her neighborhood. Comments about how standards were dropping at country clubs and restaurants. Veiled racist remarks disguised as concerns about property values and safety. The internet was doing what it called holding her accountable, but Daniel felt uncomfortable watching it unfold. Yes, what she did was wrong. Yes, her views were clearly problematic, but the speed and severity of the online backlash was almost scary. Her employer, Mitchell & Associates Real Estate, had already released a statement saying they were investigating the incident and took these matters very seriously. Translation: they were probably figuring out how to fire her without getting sued. Local news in Connecticut was camped outside her house. Her phone number had somehow leaked online, and she was apparently getting thousands of calls and messages. Some supportive, but most angry and threatening. Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. "The meeting is still on for 2 p.m. They're aware of what happened. They said to take your time." He looked at his watch. It was barely 11. He had 3 hours to pull himself together and remember why he came to Los Angeles in the first place. The car pulled up to his hotel, and thankfully there were no reporters waiting. He checked in quickly and went straight to his room. He needed a shower, a change of clothes, and a moment to breathe. As the hot water ran over him, Daniel let himself feel everything he had been holding in. The humiliation, the anger, the frustration of knowing that no matter how educated he was, no matter how successful he became, some people would always see him as someone who didn't belong. His phone kept buzzing on the bathroom counter. Message after message, missed calls, notifications. He ignored them all until he was dressed and ready to face the world again. When he finally looked, he saw messages from friends he hadn't spoken to in years. Former classmates reaching out with support. Business contacts offering encouragement. Even celebrities he had never met were commenting on the situation. One message stood out. It was from his mentor, James Chen, a venture capitalist who had guided Daniel through his first major deals. "Saw what happened. Proud of how you handled it, but don't let this distract you from today's meeting. This is your moment to shine for your reasons, not because of some viral video. Go show them why you're brilliant at what you do." Daniel smiled. James always knew what to say. He spent the next 2 hours reviewing his presentation, practicing his pitch, and getting back into business mode. The acquisition deal he was proposing was complex. Mitchell and Associates Real Estate was struggling. They had expanded too fast, made some bad investments, and were now on the verge of bankruptcy. But Daniel saw potential there. With the right leadership and capital injection, the company could be transformed. His investment firm had been in talks with them for months. Today was supposed to be the final presentation to their board of directors. If they accepted his terms, he would be leading his first major acquisition at just 28 years old. It would prove that he was more than just his father's son. At 1:30, Daniel left the hotel and headed to the meeting. The building was in downtown Los Angeles, a sleek glass tower that housed several corporate offices. As he rode the elevator to the 15th floor, he practiced his breathing. Focus. Stay present. This is what matters. The receptionist's eyes went wide when she saw him. "Mr. Wellington, welcome. Can I just say, I saw what happened, and I think you handled it with such grace." "Thank you," Daniel said politely. "I'm here for the 2 o'clock with the board. Of course they're ready for you. Conference room B." As Daniel walked down the hallway, he noticed employees peeking out of offices whispering to each other. Great. Everyone knew who he was now, but not for the reasons he wanted. He reached the conference room and paused outside the door, straightening his tie. This was it. Time to show them what he was really about. But when he opened the door and walked in, the reaction from the board members was immediate. They all stood up, and several of them looked genuinely shocked to see him. "Daniel," the chairman said, coming forward to shake his hand. "We weren't sure if you'd still come today given the circumstances. That must have been quite an ordeal." "I appreciate your concern," Daniel said, setting his briefcase down. "But I'm here to discuss business. That's what matters right now." The board members exchanged glances. There were 8 of them total, sitting around a long mahogany table. The atmosphere felt different than he had expected. More tense, maybe. Or was he just imagining it? "Before we begin," one of the board members, an older woman named Helen, spoke up. "We want you to know that we stand with you. What happened was absolutely unacceptable." Another board member chimed in. "We've actually been dealing with our own situation today. I'm not sure if you've seen the news, but one of our employees was involved in an incident." Daniel's stomach dropped. "An incident?" "Yes, on a flight this morning. She assaulted another passenger. It's been all over social media. We're in the process of determining appropriate action. The room suddenly felt very small. Daniel's mind was racing. Wait, one of their employees. The woman who hit him worked here, at Mitchell and Associates. Helen pulled out her phone and showed him a screenshot. It was Patricia Reynolds' employee profile from the company website. This is the woman, Helen said. Patricia Reynolds. She's been with our firm for 12 years. We're absolutely appalled by her behavior. Daniel felt like he was in some kind of alternate reality. The woman who had slapped him on the plane worked for the very company he was here to acquire. The company whose jobs he was trying to save. The company he had been negotiating with for months. I see, was all he could manage to say. The chairman looked confused. Daniel, are you all right? You look pale. Daniel set his briefcase on the table and took a deep breath. I need to tell you something. The passenger that Patricia Reynolds assaulted this morning? That was me. The silence in the room was deafening. Every single board member stared at him with expressions ranging from shock to horror to complete disbelief. You're joking, one of them finally said. I wish I was, Daniel replied. I'm the person in those videos. Patricia Reynolds is the woman who slapped me on the plane. Helen covered her mouth with her hand. Oh my God. The chairman sank back into his chair. This is unbelievable. Daniel, I don't even know what to say. We had no idea. We didn't connect that you were the person in the video. Another board member spoke up, his voice shaky. Are you still willing to proceed with the meeting? I mean, given what one of our employees did to you? Daniel looked around the room at their faces. These people were desperate. Their company was failing. 200 jobs were on the line. Families depended on those jobs. And yes, one of their employees had done something terrible to him. But did that mean everyone else should suffer? He thought about what his father would do. He thought about the kind of person he wanted to be. Yes, Daniel said, opening his briefcase and pulling out his presentation materials. I'm still willing to proceed. What happened this morning was wrong and it hurt. But I came here to discuss a business opportunity that I believe in. Your company has value. Your employees, most of them, are good people doing good work. One person's actions shouldn't destroy what everyone else has built. The relief in the room was visible, but Daniel held up his hand. However, he continued, if we move forward with this acquisition, there will be conditions, and we need to talk about them. The board members nodded, hanging on his every word. Shall we begin? Daniel asked, connecting his laptop to the projector. As his presentation title appeared on the screen, he felt something shift inside him. This morning, someone had tried to make him feel small, like he didn't belong. But right now, in this moment, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. And he was about to show them exactly what he was capable of. Daniel clicked to the first slide of his presentation. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Every board member sat frozen, waiting to see what he would say next. Mitchell and Associates Real Estate has been in business for 37 years. Daniel began, his voice steady and professional. Your founder built this company on the principle of helping families find homes. That's a beautiful mission, but somewhere along the way you lost sight of it. He clicked to the next slide, showing financial charts and graphs. Your expansion into luxury properties was aggressive. Too aggressive. You took on debt you couldn't service. You chased markets that were already oversaturated, and now you're 3 months away from bankruptcy. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They knew all of this, of course. That's why they were talking to Daniel in the first place. But here's what you also have, Daniel continued, his tone shifting slightly. You have 200 dedicated employees. You have brand recognition in 6 states. You have relationships with contractors, developers, and communities that took decades to build. That has value, real value. He clicked again, revealing his proposal. My firm is prepared to invest $50 million into Mitchell and Associates. We'll restructure your debt, modernize your technology systems, and refocus your business model on underserved communities where there's actual growth potential. Helen leaned forward. That's incredibly generous, Daniel. especially after what happened to you this morning. Let me finish, Daniel said, not unkindly. Because this investment comes with conditions. Non-negotiable conditions, the chairman nodded slowly. We're listening. Daniel took a breath. This was the part that mattered most to him. First condition, every single employee, from executives to administrative staff, goes through mandatory diversity and sensitivity training. Not some online course they can click through in an hour. Real in-person workshops led by experts. This happens within the first 3 months. One of the board members, a man named Thomas, spoke up. We can agree to that. Second condition, Daniel continued, your hiring practices get completely overhauled. I want to see diverse candidates interviewed for every single position. I want mentorship programs for young professionals from underrepresented backgrounds. I want internship opportunities for students from schools that don't typically get recruited from. That's fair, Helen said, taking notes. Third condition, Daniel said, his voice getting firmer. There will be a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. Racism, sexism, homophobia, ageism, any of it. One strike and you're out. No exceptions. No matter how long you've been with the company or how much money you bring in. The room was silent again. Daniel could see some of the board members exchanging nervous glances. He knew what they were thinking. They were thinking about Patricia Reynolds and what this policy would mean for her. Which brings me to Patricia Reynolds, Daniel said, addressing the elephant in the room directly. I'm sure you're all wondering what I expect you to do about her. The chairman cleared his throat. Daniel, we were planning to terminate her employment immediately. Her actions were inexcusable and they've brought tremendous negative attention to our company. I know, Daniel said, and I understand that would be the easy solution. Fire her. Make a public statement condemning her actions and move on. That's what everyone expects you to do. But, Helen asked, sensing there was more. Daniel pulled up his final slide. It wasn't a chart or a graph. It was just text. Simple, clear text that read, cancellation doesn't create change. Education does. I don't want you to fire Patricia Reynolds, Daniel said. The reaction was immediate. Several board members started talking at once. You can't be serious. Daniel, she assaulted you. The public outcry alone would be massive if we kept her on staff. Daniel held up his hand, asking for quiet. I'm not saying there shouldn't be consequences. I'm saying that firing her solves nothing. She goes away, but her beliefs don't change. She just becomes another angry person blaming others for her problems. And your company learns nothing except how to protect itself from bad press. He paused, making eye contact with each board member. Here's what I propose instead. Patricia Reynolds keeps her job, but she enters a mandatory program. 6 months of intensive diversity training and education. She volunteers 20 hours a month in communities different from her own. She attends workshops, listens to speakers, and writes reports on what she's learning. And it's all supervised and documented. Thomas shook his head. Why would you want that? She humiliated you in front of dozens of people. Because I believe people can change, Daniel said simply. Not everyone. Not always. But sometimes. And I think she deserves the chance to do the hard work of confronting her own biases. If she refuses or if she doesn't take it seriously, then yes, she gets fired. But if we don't even give her the opportunity to grow, then what are we really saying? That some people are beyond redemption? That's a dangerous road to go down. The room fell into a thoughtful silence. Helen was the first to speak. That's remarkably compassionate of you, Daniel. I'm not sure I could be that gracious if someone had done that to me. I'm not doing it to be gracious, Daniel replied. I'm doing it because I've seen what happens when we just cancel people and throw them away. They get angrier. They get more entrenched in their views. They find echo chambers online that tell them they're the real victims, and nothing gets better. He closed his laptop and looked around the table. My father used to tell me something when I was growing up. He said that the hardest thing in the world is to give grace to people who don't deserve it. But sometimes that's exactly what creates change. Not always. Not even most of the time. But sometimes. The chairman stood up and walked to the window looking out at the Los Angeles skyline. When he turned back, his eyes were red. My daughter is dating a man from Pakistan. At our last family dinner, my brother made some comments about it. Ugly comments. And I didn't say anything. I just sat there uncomfortable, and later I told myself it wasn't worth causing a scene. He paused. But what you went through this morning, what you're proposing now, it makes me realize I should have said something. I should have done something. Other board members started sharing their own stories. Helen talked about watching her best friend, who was gay, get passed over for promotions for years. Thomas admitted he had made assumptions about people based on how they dressed or talked. Another board member, a woman named Linda, confessed that she had crossed the street to avoid young black men in hoodies and felt ashamed about it now. Daniel listened to all of them. This was what he had hoped for. Not just a business deal, but a real conversation about things that mattered. So, the chairman finally said, returning to his seat, "Let's talk specifics. If we accept your proposal, what's the timeline?" For the next hour, they went through every detail. The financial restructuring, the new community outreach programs, the diversity initiatives, the training requirements, Patricia's supervised rehabilitation program, all of it. By the time they finished, it was after 5 in the evening. Daniel's stomach was growling. He hadn't eaten since a quick breakfast at the airport that morning before everything went wrong. "We need to bring this to a vote," the chairman said, all in favor of accepting Daniel Wellington's proposal, with all conditions as stated. One by one, every board member raised their hand. It was unanimous. "Then it's decided," the chairman said, standing to shake Daniel's hand. "Welcome to Mitchell & Associates, Daniel. Or rather, welcome as our new majority stakeholder." As Daniel packed up his materials, Helen approached him. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. When that woman hit you this morning, what was the first thing you thought? Before you had time to be diplomatic or strategic, what was your actual first reaction?" Daniel smiled sadly. "I thought, here we go again. Another person who sees me and decides who I am before I even open my mouth. Another person who thinks they know my story, my worth, my place in the world. And I wondered how many more times in my life I'm going to have to prove that I belong in spaces where I've already earned my seat." Helen nodded. "Thank you for being honest, and thank you for choosing to respond with wisdom instead of anger. A lot of people wouldn't have." "I'm not perfect," Daniel said. "I'm angry. I'm hurt. But I'm also tired of letting other people's ignorance control my actions. That woman tried to make me feel small this morning. But I refused to become small. I refused to let her win." As Daniel left the building, he felt different than when he arrived. The deal was done. The company would be saved. 200 people would keep their jobs. And maybe, just maybe, Patricia Reynolds would learn something that could change her life. His phone buzzed with a message from his father. "Heard the meeting went well. Proud of you. Not just for the business win, but for how you chose to handle everything. That takes real strength," Daniel smiled and texted back. "Thanks, Dad. Learned from the best." As he climbed into the car to head back to his hotel, Daniel looked at social media one more time. The story was still everywhere. But now there was something new. News outlets were starting to report on his decision about Patricia Reynolds. Some people praised him for his compassion. Others criticized him, saying he was being too soft, that she didn't deserve a second chance. Daniel didn't care about the opinions. He knew what felt right to him, and for the first time since that morning, he felt at peace with everything that had happened. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Restructuring the company, implementing new policies, starting the training programs, and yes, sitting down with Patricia Reynolds to outline what would be expected of her if she chose to stay. It wouldn't be easy. Change never was. But Daniel was ready for it. As the car pulled away from the curb, he caught his reflection in the window. The mark on his face from the slap had faded, but the memory of it wouldn't. And maybe that was okay. Maybe that memory would remind him why all of this mattered, why doing the hard thing was worth it. 6 months later, Daniel sat in his office overlooking downtown Los Angeles. The view still amazed him sometimes. In half a year, so much had changed. Mitchell & Associates was no longer on the brink of collapse. They had closed 3 major deals in underserved communities, opened 2 new offices, and hired 40 new employees. The company was thriving, but the numbers weren't what made Daniel proud. It was the culture shift. Walking through the office now felt different. There was energy, diversity, and a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. His assistant knocked on the door. "Daniel, she's here for your 2 o'clock. Daniel took a deep breath. "Send her in." Patricia Reynolds walked into his office, and Daniel could see immediately that she was nervous. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her, and she couldn't quite meet his eyes. It was their first face-to-face conversation since that day on the plane. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said quietly. sitting down in the chair across from his desk. "Of course," Daniel replied. "You asked to see me. I'm listening." Patricia had changed in 6 months. It wasn't just physical, though she did look different, less rigid somehow, more open. But it was something deeper that Daniel noticed. The defensiveness that had radiated from her that day on the plane was gone. "I wanted to give you this," she said, pulling out a folder from her bag. "It's my final report from the program. All my volunteer hours are documented. All the workshops I attended, everything." Daniel took the folder but didn't open it. "How was it?" "The program. Be honest." Patricia let out a shaky breath. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I don't mean the hours or the work. I mean facing the truth about myself." She finally looked up at him and there were tears in her eyes. "Daniel, I was so angry that first month. I felt like everyone was against me. I thought I was the victim. Can you believe that? After what I did to you, I actually thought I was the one being treated unfairly." "What changed?" Daniel asked. "There was this moment," Patricia said, wiping her eyes. "I was volunteering at the youth center in South LA, the one your foundation supports. There was this kid there, maybe 16 years old. His name was Chris. Smart kid, really smart. He was telling me about how he wanted to be an engineer, but he was worried about going to college because he was afraid people would think he didn't belong there." She paused, struggling to continue. "And I realized that's what I did to you. I saw you and decided you didn't belong. I didn't know anything about you, but I made up a whole story in my head about who you were and what you deserved. And I did that to you. Someone who had accomplished more by 28 than I'll probably accomplish in my whole life." Daniel stayed quiet, letting her continue. Working with those kids, hearing their stories, seeing how hard they work just to be given a chance, it broke something open in me. These weren't the scary people I had convinced myself existed. They were just people. Kids with dreams and fears and hopes just like everyone else. Patricia's voice cracked. "How did I become someone who couldn't see that? How did I become so full of fear and judgment?" "We're all capable of it," Daniel said gently. "The question is what we do when we realize it." Patricia nodded. "I went through old social media posts, things I had written over the years, and I was disgusted with myself. All those comments about those people and the neighborhood changing. I was talking about families. Real people just trying to live their lives, and I treated them like they were invading my space." She pulled out her phone and showed Daniel something. "This is Chris, the kid I mentioned. He's applying to MIT now. I've been helping him with his applications. His mom works 3 jobs to support him and his sister. 3 jobs. And I used to complain about people like her, saying they were bringing down property values. I'm so ashamed." Daniel looked at the photo. A young man with a bright smile holding up an MIT pennant. "Have you told him about what happened on the plane?" "I did," Patricia said. "Last week. I thought he should know who I really was. Or who I used to be. I'm still figuring out who I am now." She smiled sadly. "You know what he said? He said everyone makes mistakes and what matters is what you do after. This 16-year-old kid showed me more grace than I showed you." "Kids often teach us the most important lessons," Daniel said. Patricia reached into her bag again and pulled out a piece of paper. "I wrote you a letter. A real apology. Not the PR statement my lawyer wanted me to release. Not something designed to make me look good. Just the truth." She handed it to Daniel with shaking hands. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve forgiveness. But I needed you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did. I understand the pain I caused. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure I never cause that kind of pain again." Daniel unfolded the letter and read it slowly. It was handwritten, 4 pages long, raw and honest. Patricia detailed her journey over the past 6 months. The workshops that made her uncomfortable. The conversations that challenged everything she thought she knew. The volunteer work that opened her eyes. The therapy sessions where she had to confront where her biases came from. When he finished reading, Daniel set the letter down on his desk. "Thank you for this. It takes courage to be this honest. I'm speaking at schools now," Patricia said, "telling my story, not because I'm proud of it, but because I think it might help other people recognize their own biases before they hurt someone. If my mistakes can prevent someone else from making the same ones, then maybe something good can come from all of this." "That's good work," Daniel said. "Important work." Patricia stood up to leave, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something? Why did you give me this chance?" After what I did to you, you could have destroyed my life. You had every right to. Why didn't you? Daniel thought about the question. He had asked himself the same thing many times over the past 6 months. Because I've seen what happens when we just throw people away. They get bitter. They get angrier. They find other people who tell them they're right to be angry. And the cycle continues. He stood up and walked to the window. But I've also learned that real change is possible when people are willing to do the hard work. You did that work, Patricia. You didn't have to. You could have just gone through the motions, served your time, and moved on. But you actually committed to changing. That's rare. I hurt you, Patricia said, her voice barely a whisper. That slap, it wasn't just physical. I humiliated you in front of all those people. How can you stand here and talk to me like this? Daniel turned to face her. Because holding on to anger would only hurt me, and because I believe that people are more than their worst moments. You did something terrible, but you're working to be better. That matters. Patricia wiped her eyes again. I'll never forget what I did. Every time I see someone being treated unfairly, every time I hear someone make a racist comment, I remember that I was that person, and it pushes me to speak up, to do better. After Patricia left, Daniel sat at his desk for a long time, thinking about everything. His phone buzzed with a message from his father. Saw Patricia's video, the one where she talks at that high school. You made the right call, son. Change isn't always pretty, but it's necessary. Daniel smiled and looked at the photo on his desk. It was from the ribbon-cutting ceremony at Mitchell & Associates' new community office. The whole team was there, including Patricia, standing in the back but smiling genuinely. The story had taken on a life of its own over the past 6 months. News outlets had followed Patricia's transformation. Some people praised it as an example of redemption and growth. Others criticized Daniel for being too soft, saying Patricia didn't deserve a second chance. There were think pieces written about forgiveness, accountability, and whether people who do racist things can truly change. Daniel didn't have all the answers. He didn't know if Patricia's change would be permanent. He didn't know if his approach was right or if he should have handled things differently. But he knew one thing for certain. Doing nothing would have changed nothing. His assistant knocked again.
Daniel, there's someone here to see you.
He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. His name is Chris. Daniel's eyebrows raised. The kid from the youth center? He says Patricia told him he could come by. He brought his MIT acceptance letter. Send him in, Daniel said, standing up with a genuine smile. A young man walked in, confident but respectful, carrying a folder. Mr. Wellington, I'm sorry to just show up like this, but I got into MIT. And Ms. Patricia said you were the person who made it possible for her to help me. I wanted to say thank you. Daniel shook his hand firmly. Congratulations, Chris, that's an incredible achievement. But you got in because of your hard work, not because of me. Maybe, Chris said, grinning. But Ms. Patricia told me about what happened between you two. About how you could have ended her career, but you gave her a chance to grow instead. That's what helped her become the kind of person who would spend hours helping a kid like me with college applications. He paused, looking around the office. My dad isn't in my life. Never has been. And I used to be angry about that. Angry about a lot of things. But seeing what you did, how you responded to someone who hurt you, it taught me something. Being successful isn't just about making money or getting into good schools. It's about who you choose to be when you have the power to hurt people back. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. That's wise beyond your years, Chris. I'm going to study engineering. And someday I want to come back and help kids like me. Create programs. Build opportunities. Be the kind of person who lifts others up instead of pushing them down. After Chris left, Daniel walked back to his window and looked out at the city below. Somewhere down there, people were struggling with the same prejudices that had caused Patricia to hit him on that plane. Somewhere, someone was being judged unfairly because of how they looked. Somewhere, a kid was wondering if they belonged in spaces they had earned. The world hadn't changed overnight. One story, one transformation, one act of grace couldn't fix everything. But maybe it could start something. Maybe Chris would go on to help other kids. Maybe Patricia would change more minds. Maybe the ripple effects would reach further than Daniel could ever know. His phone buzzed one more time. It was a text from Patricia. Thank you for believing I could be better. I won't let you down. Daniel typed back. You already haven't. Keep going. He looked at his reflection in the window. remembering that morning on the plane 6 months ago. The sting of the slap, the humiliation, the anger. It all felt like a lifetime ago now. That moment could have destroyed him. It could have made him bitter and closed off. Instead, he had chosen a different path. Not an easier one, but a better one. And maybe that was the real story. Not about what happened to him, but about what he chose to do with it. Not about the slap, but about the hand he extended afterward. Not about the anger, but about the grace. Daniel turned back to his desk and got back to work. There were more deals to close, more communities to serve, more lives to impact. The work never stopped. But now it felt different. It felt like it mattered in ways he hadn't fully understood before. Sometimes the most shocking thing that can happen isn't the act of hatred. It's the response of love. And that response, Daniel was learning, could change everything.